I tell you, man, I was just planning on watching a movie and having something to eat, but I get flabbergasted every time when I go to look at something on YouTube. I got a notification, and some person is making a ridiculous statement. And I have to, instead of calling them an idiot, which I'm prone to do, I have to sometimes try to understand because I remember being taught the same thing. Now, this person told me that we could be looking at stars that are no longer there, that we are just seeing the light that has traveled over millions of years through trillions and trillions of miles through outer space, and that the star is probably somewhere else, and we're only seeing that star's light that is in the act of still traveling. And that is asinine. But I was taught that too. I used to believe that I could be looking up at a star that could no longer be there, and I'm just seeing old light. That the light is still traveling trillions of miles over millions of years. Now, that is absurd. All you have to do is think about it, okay? Light is a byproduct, okay? It's usually a result of something that's hot. Okay, now, if I use this flashlight and shine that light there, you see, that light is a byproduct of the flashlight. Light cannot exist on its own accord. It needs a source. And it can only travel the distance that its source allows it to, whatever power or lumen flashlight you have, that's the distance it can travel. Now, once I extinguish the source, the light instantaneously is also eliminated. Okay, light cannot travel independently of its source. Okay, this cannot be demonstrated on Earth. This guy wanted to go blah, blah, blah about radio waves. Okay, that irritates me. Okay, because we're told that they're a form of light. These people are liars. Okay, they have to make up lies because they know they can't demonstrate anything with light. They cannot show light to exist beyond its source. A source is required. Now, if light could travel independently of its source, we could demonstrate it, but we cannot. Once I extinguish that source, its light is all gone. Okay, light is not independent. It is a byproduct and a result, usually of something hot. Now, for an experiment, it doesn't really require a high IQ, but if you found a flat level road 50 miles long and you put someone at the other end and you shined a light at them really quickly, just like this, on and off, that light would never travel that 50 miles to the other person, whereas they could reflect it. Matter of fact, you could shine that light all night at them, and that light would not travel to the 50 miles to the opposite end, where they could reflect it or have it shine off something they were holding, a piece of metal. Now, they might be able to see this, your source, but it would never travel up to them where they could reflect it, where that light would actually touch something they were holding. And this is a fact. Okay, we are taught lies by, there's two branches of science. There's real science that can be demonstrated to produce the same result repeatedly, and then there's scientism, which cannot be demonstrated, which is propped up by theories that cannot be demonstrated. And people eat this stuff up and they love it. They don't care to understand it. All they care about is hearing or reading it, memorizing it, and then regurgitating it. And that's all they care about. Now, they can't understand that the lights we look up at in our sky are not trillions of miles away or light years. They are local lights, and they are directly over the Earth. All right, the night sky we look up at is not an infinite and expanding vacuum. It's so stupid, everything they say can be debunked immediately. Vacuums cannot expand. On Earth, the only way you can demonstrate a vacuum is with a container or a chamber. And once they're contained, they cannot expand. Okay? A vacuum is more than the absence of air. They use these little sayings to deceive you. And it's really not that hard to deceive people anymore because they don't care about the truth. They want someone else to dictate it for them, and all they do is hear it, read it, memorize it, and regurgitate it. That's all they do. That's their brand of knowledge. And it is the true definition of artificial intelligence. We have been systematically dumbed down since kindergarten. But there is an avenue of escape. You can regain your personal and independent process of logic to examine something and try to understand it on its own merits by what you can demonstrate or verify. Okay, things that you can't demonstrate or verify are 99.9% untrue. Light cannot exist on its own accord. It needs a source. And I will not listen to anyone trying to compare radio waves or Wi-Fi to light. Light is not a thing. It's a byproduct. It requires a source. And once that source is extinguished, so too immediately is all its light. It does not continue to travel and is ridiculous. All you have to do is think about it. Light cannot travel millions of miles. It can only travel as far as its source can propel it. All right? That's why there's 100 lumen, 200 lumen, 1,000 lumen flashlights. Because that light can only travel as far as its source or flashlight can propel it. Okay? It doesn't continue to travel independently of its source. Or if the source moves over here, all that light I shine does not. It moves with it, okay? Because it's a result of its source. All right? Stars are moving, but they are in our sky. We can see them, and they perform one circuit in 24 hours in our sky. It is not the Earth's rotation making these stationary stars appear as if they're revolving around the Earth, because the paragraph that tells you that stars are stationary or that the rotation of the Earth is what causes the stars to appear as they're moving, 3 pages later they'll tell you that everything in the universe is moving because of inflation or the Big Bang. But they are successful with to make sure you don't realize this. They always show the sun as a stationary object with all the planets revolving around it. But 3 pages in, they tell you the sun is also moving too because of inflation or the Big Bang. And you people don't put it together because you were not programmed to question anything you are told. You are programmed to instantaneously believe it, memorize it, and regurgitate it, and call that intellect. It's not intellect, it's programming. You are turned into a body of artificial intelligence, all of which cannot be demonstrated. Now, if light was independent of its source, you could shine it down a 50-mile long road that was flat. You could have someone at the other end, and you could flash it real quick, and that light would travel to that person at some point. Okay? It never does. You can shine that light and make it a constant light, and it will never travel up to a person holding a mirror or a piece of metal to reflect it. It will never happen because light does not work that way. It is not independent of its source. The light is produced by its source and can only travel as far as the source can propel it. And once the source is extinguished, so too is all its light. And that can be demonstrated, and we're taught lies. Stars are not light years or trillions of miles away. 1 light year is almost 6 trillion miles. And as I've said in other videos, do you know how long it would take for 1 trillion seconds to go by? It would take over 33,000 years for that to go by. All right, now a mile, I can demonstrate in a second as an inch. It would take me a second to cover an inch with my finger. So if I could propel some type of ruler out into the towards the horizon, a trillion inches, it would take over 33,000 years for it to come back. Now, do you think you could see a trillion miles? That is asinine and absurd, let alone 6 trillion miles in 1 light year. We could see these stars with our naked eye. They say Polaris, the North Star Pole, is 300 to 400 light years away. Do you know how many trillions and upon trillions of miles that is? 240 trillion miles? Are you kidding me? I believe it's 240. It could be 2,000. I don't know. But these are astronomical numbers they throw at us and we instantaneously believe it. It is asinine because they don't want you to truly understand your reality, our cosmology, the earth. Most of you people do not even truly know what you are standing on. Okay? Now they can do time-lapse star trails at the North Pole and they'll blab out. You see how those stars go in a circle around the Polaris North Pole star? That is produced by the spin rotation of the Earth. They tell us at the equator the Earth is spinning faster than a mediocre bullet, 1,039 miles an hour, the ground we stand on. But you can look up anytime and see a cloud float by at 15 miles an hour at 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet higher than that pattern is another pattern of clouds going in the opposite direction 5 miles slower. That is ridiculous. Now, if these time-lapse star trails at the North Pole are produced by the rotation of the Earth, which is 1,039 or so miles every hour, why don't these star trails that are time-lapse, why don't they show the movement that the Earth is doing that's 66 times greater? We are taught that the Earth is going around the sun at over 66,000 miles an hour and spinning on its axis at 1,039 miles an hour. So every hour, every second, the Earth is doing two things. It's spinning on its axis over 1,000 miles an hour, and it's doing a big circle around the sun while it spins itself. Okay? But you don't see any of this type of linear. It's not a straight line, but for over a period of an hour, I'll say it's a linear movement sideways. And that movement, which is 66 times greater than the alleged rotation, doesn't show up one iota in these time-lapse star trails at all. And that proves the Earth is not floating, buzzing, whizzing, speeding around the sun. Or there's no way there would be perfect circular time-lapse star trails with all these stars doing a perfect circle around Polaris North Star Pole. The North Pole star. There's no way that could happen. Okay? Those star trails would be all mixed up. Okay? They would not just show the slower motion of the Earth. Now you got these knuckleheads will say, well, it's the degree. It would not even be 1 degree of the Earth going around the sun over a 24-hour period. That's ridiculous. No, time-lapse star trails would show the 66,000 mile per hour movement over the 1,000 mile per hour slower movement. So we're lied to ad nauseum relentlessly. Now they're talking about earthquakes all over, and I'd say a good 70% of earthquakes are real, but there's 30% of them that are not real. They detonate explosives and say it's earthquakes. They do it all the time. Now, if they wanted to, they could detonate a bomb near the Hoover Dam and flood the whole area right out and blame it on an earthquake. Now on the news they got people catching asteroids coming in on their camera doorbells. Those are not asteroids. Their trajectory is wrong. They're high altitude cargo planes throwing out incendiaries to simulate asteroids. We're being lied to like with no pause and distracted left and right by these scumbags with the stimulus and Trump at the CPAC. There's things coming that are bad for the world, and so many are going to be deceived. More are going to be deceived than those who retain their salvation. Okay, the asteroids, they're going to start talking about asteroids, and these scumbags at NASA, sooner or later, by the end of summer or early fall, are going to try to report that they have found some type of alien technology on Mars. Okay, you cannot land on these lights in our sky. Zoom in on them, and you can see they're not solid objects. Now, I'm not saying that atmospheric turbulence doesn't cause them to flicker. Yeah, it does, but atmospheric turbulence is not going to make something, a body of light, not have retain some of its appearance. And these stars look like currents of energy and action. They actually look like they're alive. They resemble currents of electromagnetic energy. And that's what I think they are. Some people think they're a form of angel. They could be. I don't really like to bet the bank on what Enoch says. I go by the regular canonized Bible. But what is truth? Who knows? I know truth is what I can verify, what I can see and verify. Anything else is faith. And all these theories that Einstein put out, in my opinion, that's all faith. That's their faith to believe in stuff that is asinine and that cannot be demonstrated. Scientism and religion are parallel each other on so many factors, okay? Because we both believe in something we can't see. One side calls it faith and the other side calls it theory. And the theory cannot be demonstrated. It's so effing stupid, I can't believe it. Like, people thinking that we human beings and matter and hydrogen and so-called atoms came from nowhere. That's impossible. That would be like me saying that lamp came from nowhere. No, it came from somewhere. A superior being made it. Without that superior being, you could not make that lamp. That superior being had to have more than just his own physical matter. He or she had to have the ability of thought. Without a thought, nothing can be made, nothing can be done. Okay, now you see that wood clock up there? Why couldn't a tree produce that on one of its branches? A tree is a living thing. Okay, a tree outside producing leaves that relies on the sun and water and nutrients and grows is a living thing. So why didn't evolution allow this tree to produce a clock like that off one of its limbs? Because evolution is a lie. Evolution is just an asinine way to say that one life form transformed or transitioned into another. It does not explain where a primordial pond or a primordial soup came from, or where the lightning bolt came from that hit that pond that somehow activated some matter to clump together and become a cell. It doesn't explain that. Nothing and nowhere cannot exist in a three-dimensional reality. Okay? And we got men that their IQs are 180 plus. They're geniuses and furnished with all the ingredients cannot mimic a fly or a caterpillar or any insect. They can't mimic it. They can try to make these little robots that are powered by the sun, but they do not reproduce. They do not consume nutrients. They consume energy with little solar powered panels on them, but they're nothing compared to the real thing. So tell me, if the genius of men cannot do this in a lab, how did nothing from nowhere do it? It's asinine. People who say, well, it was a singularity that caused the Big Bang. And a singularity is defined as a previous universe that ran out its course, expanded as far as it could, and then collapsed back in on itself, taking time, space, and matter with it. And it collapsed in on itself to an infinitesimal point so small they call it infinitesimal. Where then would that singularity itself exist if time, space, and matter collapsed in on itself? There is no such thing as a void. A void is nothing, and nothing can exist in a three-dimensional reality. There is always areas of time, space, and matter. Nothing is just a word. Okay? There had to be a beginning with a three-dimensional reality. As there's a beginning and there's an end, as the laws of thermodynamics clearly describe. Okay, so something outside of time, space, and matter had to make us, and that's God. That's the fourth dimension. We live in three dimensions, up, down, and width. There is a fourth dimension. It's the spirit world, and any dimensions beyond that are connected to the spirit world and God. And we can never, the only way you can access these are through death. These cannot be accessed in the physical world. You can access some element of it through faith and through prayer and through a connection with God. But this is not something that can be demonstrated in a laboratory, mixing physical matters, this ingredient or that, or hitting something with electricity. It cannot be done. All this stuff at CERN is all fraud. It's all fraud. The money's redirected to other black ops type things, okay? Everything they say about producing the Higgs boson God particle, it exists for a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second, is all lies. All lies that can't be demonstrated. They'll show you a spreadsheet. And nerds and stupid ass people believe it. They think that's evidence. What we're coming to is, in my opinion, calamity, and most people are going to buy everything the news says. When they say an asteroid the size of Texas is coming, everyone will believe it. I know for a fact if they timed an announcement with the next major storm, they could say that the Earth has suffered a pole shift, and people will instantaneously believe it. There's articles, Fox News articles, science wants to move the Earth, the Sun, and all the planets to another region of space to avoid killer asteroids. And people cannot understand they're being mocked. They're being set up for the next $50 trillion that NASA or whoever's going to ask to do this, to make these engines. And it's just a setup. It's just a way to allocate funding for nonsense. They'll show you artist renderings, animations. All space documentaries are animation. That would not be true if there were 10,000 satellites in orbit of the Earth. We'd have real-time footage. You could go on the internet right now and look at any region of space you wanted to, wherever that satellite was. Lagrange 1, Lagrange 2, 1 million miles out, 2 million miles out. We can't do that. No amount of money is accessible for you to pay to rent any satellite to even zoom in on a family member 10 states away in real time. Nothing like that exists. The technology they say we have is not what we see. I don't know what to say. It's just this one idiot telling me this nonsense about stars, that the star might not even be there and we're only seeing its light that's traveling trillions of miles over millions of years. The star is somewhere else now. And we don't see it yet because the light hasn't traveled to us. In about 20 million years, that light will finally get to us. And then we'll know where the star really is. That is so asinine. If people will continue to cling to that, there's no hope. You'll never know anything. You'll always require another theory to prop up the previous theory. You'll never arrive to any demonstrable proof unless you believe in digital composites and artist renderings and animations. Now people talk about atoms. No one has ever seen an atom. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I don't believe it factually because there's no picture of an atom unless you again believe in digital composites. It's not real. How can you say these things exist when they can't be seen? I understand if you can find, like, if something's taking a dump somewhere and you can find a trace of the shit, then you can assume something's doing it. But you can't go on and write page after page of what it is. You can't do that. Dark matter, dark energy, all lies to continue to prop up an infinite and expanding vacuum. Above our heads, it's not a vacuum, okay? If it were a vacuum, there'd be no oxygen or any gas on the earth. Okay? When the sun heats the water, it turns into condensation and it rises. Okay, it defeats gravity easily. Gravity doesn't pull gas down to the ground. But they tell us our atmosphere is being held to the ground by gravity. But if that were true, it could never rain. Water could never evaporate into condensation and rise and collect in clouds, get too heavy and rain back down on us. Do you understand that? If outer space was an infinite and expanding vacuum, we wouldn't be here. It would violently suck all our atmosphere and oxygen away. We are lied to about outer space. There is no outer space. It's just our nighttime sky. Everything, the stars, the sun, and the moon, are within the firmament. The same way the Bible says. There is no Van Allen radiation belts. That's just a counterfeited version of the firmament. You cannot have gas and oxygen anywhere unless it's contained. That's why they put hairspray in a can. Okay, or aerosols are in a can. They need to be contained. Okay? If there's no container, they will just go out in every direction and disperse. Okay? You need a container. The oxygen that is on the earth is in a container, and that is the firmament. Otherwise, it would go and escape and fill whatever empty volume there was. And if there was a vacuum over our heads, all the oxygen and gas would go into it. Like in one of my videos, I show you what a vacuum does. It sucks. We are lied to because scientism was put in place to contradict the realities we see, because the Bible demonstrates the realities we see as per how God made the earth. And if you study the Bible, you can see that the way God describes the earth is what we see. The face of the earth, the pillars of the earth, the firmament, everything is better described in our Bibles than what these liars tell us, who claim there is no God. They're liars. They worship Mars, Venus, Saturn. Every day of our week is named after a false god. Every light in the sky is named after a false god. NASA names all its missions after false gods. Apollo, Orion, Artemis, and the last last rocket they blasted off was named Dragon, and that's another name for Satan. We did not go to Mars. We never landed on the moon. These would be great achievements, but it's not a failure to realize you cannot do the impossible. If something's impossible, it's not a failure of intellect. It's an impossibility. The moon is probably some sort of plasma. And I'll admit that's what I heard. I can't verify it. But what's coming this summer and early spring with the stimulus check, saying the one they just passed, saying that they gotta release all alien UFO nonsense in 6 months, it's coming. Aliens, asteroids, more earthquakes, some real, some not. But all I can say is cling to your Bibles, look for the truth in your Bible, stop instantaneously believing David Muir. He is a scumbag. Hannity too, Tucker Carlson too, they love their UFO garbage. Aliens are real, but they're not from other worlds, they're from the earth, they are demonic entities. And praise the Lord God and His Son Yeshua, Jesus Christ.